people I've studied, Michael Phelps, Roger Federer, I think they very clearly exhibit like real ADHD symptoms. Michael Phelps diagnosed, Roger Federer, my non-professional diagnosis, but again, I hopefully am well versed enough to say, hey, maybe this is something that we might look at. I'm interested if there is a relationship with ADHD and athletes, if that is a common thing that we're seeing. In some ways, I think it could be an asset to a lot of athletes, but is there some broader relationship there, or am I just reading too much into this?
No, I think there definitely is something there. And I think that it's really hard to know if it's chicken or the egg or a combination of both. One of the things about ADHD is kind of most people say, oh, it's a problem with focus. It's a problem with concentration. But in fact, that ADHD sometimes is hyperfocus. And a lot of parents will come and say, oh, my child does not have ADHD. They can sit and do Legos for 6 hours without getting up and might forget to go to the bathroom because they're so hyperfocused. So that can't be ADHD. But in fact, that's actually one of the symptoms of ADHD is an ability to hyperfocus. The kind of metaphor that I like to use is kind of a horse in Central Park. They have those blinders on, and the blinders are set at just the right degree out from the eye so that they can see straight ahead of them while they're going through the park. And if somebody starts crossing the street, they can see them with enough time to stop. But at the same time, it's not such a wide lens that they have that they see everything going on in their periphery. So kind of having that appropriate focus is kind of set by those blinders in the horse. The thing with ADHD often is that it'll be midnight, and it's more of a metaphor than an actual, but it's midnight in a dark alley. And the person with ADHD might be hyper focused on what's on their phone and staring at their Instagram feed, whereas there's who knows what's going on everywhere else. And that's a time that you want to be at that kind of really broad focus, but people are hyper focused. In the classroom, it might be the opposite. You really want to hyper focus on what the teacher is saying and listening to what's going on, but they're interested in the person next to them that's whispering and the tick, tick, tick of the clock and the bird that's outside. And so they're kind of have that really broad focus, which would be great in an alley at midnight, but it's terrible in a classroom. So it's really the inappropriate, mistimed movement of those blinders closed or open to whatever the task is.
And to extend that metaphor, interventions for that, whether it's medical behavior, whether it's pharmacological, behavioral, would be the ability to shift those blinders either in or out based on the situation when it's relevant, correct?
Yeah. The stimulants, they tend to close the focus. That's right. And so one of the side effects is that if you're hyper focused on the wrong thing on the medication, it can be an absolute negative. You can go, if you're sitting down to study and your focus gets pulled in some other direction, you can end up on some rabbit hole and spend hours on the wrong thing. Or kind of sometimes what happens is people will have a scab on their leg and they'll look at it and they'll just play with it a little bit. And then with the medication, they hyper focus on it and can kind of cause kind of bigger lesions if they're just kind of picking at their skin, because again, they're hyper focusing on the wrong thing. So that can happen.
So I remember when I was a kid and I was diagnosed with ADHD, or technically at the time it was ADD. And now it's, we have a hyperactive versus.
So there's 3 types. Okay. There's ADHD hyperactive type, ADHD inattentive type, and ADHD combined type. And so it's always ADHD kind of in the nomenclature currently, but they don't all have hyperactivity.
Interesting. And so I believe I was not the hyperactive type, but when I was prescribed medication, my doctor had told me, whenever you use this, write the action plan for what you're going to do before you execute it. And hopefully that will stave off those rabbit holes. Obviously, just one minor intervention that can be useful, but that's something I did and I'd always done until I really slowed down taking the medication. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm getting a lot more out of this than just going down these crazy rabbit holes, which can be pretty deep.
Absolutely.
So when we're talking about ADHD in athletes, I would imagine that exercise is one of the best interventions. Are there any others that are really effective within that specific population that you've seen?
Sleep. I think sleep is probably the most important protective measure against any mental health condition, and ADHD being one of the top.
So a lot of the pharmacological interventions for ADHD are sort of go against sleep. They just are sleep disruptors. How do you reconcile those two things as a medical professional?
So, Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. And so if a medication causes side effects that are worse than what they're helping with, it's just not okay. And so like, I don't care if it gives you 10 out of 10 focus all day long. If it prevents you from sleeping and you can't get us to sleep until, 3 a.m. and then have to be up at 7, like that's just not okay. And I'm not going to give you another medication to help you fall asleep to offset the side effect of the stimulant that keeps you from falling asleep. It's a no-go. And so like, I will not prescribe a medication if it causes side effects that are intolerable.
So part of a negative side effect like that would be, oh, I'm not sleeping well, so I self-medicate with caffeine, and that causes me to sleep even worse. And it's this negative feedback loop. It seems to me like a lot of the mental health challenges that an athlete might face are because of these negative feedback loops. Some of the reasons why they have success are because they're creating positive feedback loops through habits and things along those lines. Is that something that you're seeing as well? Is that something that, are there specific feedback loops that you see athletes or regular populations fall into that are particularly disastrous?
There's a lot. I think one would be, and I don't prescribe opiates. I just have decided since day one that that's not something I want to do. But I do think that with high performing athletes, the amount of physical strain that they put on their bodies is immense, and the potential for pain, long-term pain, can be great. And therefore you can see a lot of opiate or narcotic use and then abuse because they're trying to self-medicate for pain. And it also helps with sleep, and it also helps with anxiety. And so they're very strong medications, but also very dangerous because they have such strong side effects. And so that's certainly one. And then sleep medications like Ambien, I think, a lot of people use that, whether it's for a flight or for every night use, or I've got a big test tomorrow, I've got a big presentation tomorrow. And so using sleep medications, I think, can be a really bad negative loop, in part because they've just pretty interesting studies where the number one effect of most sleep medications is morning grogginess.
Low quality sleep.
And but the thing is, the half-life of the medications, the length of the medication works, it's still sort of working in the morning when you wake up. And so you're still groggy in the morning. And so then you wake up and you're like, ugh, I needed that Ambien to fall asleep and stay asleep. And I took it and I'm still tired. That means I probably even need more tomorrow, or I need to take it again tomorrow because I can't be tired like this again tomorrow. And so people have bad sleep because of the Ambien, but then think that they need the Ambien to not be as tired the next day. And that's yet another loop.